Okay, sorry for the short delay. Hello, welcome everyone to the second part of our Game Days program, which is a little bit more serious than the first part that is mainly about lectures and game development. This part is mainly about practical and very useful information and maybe a little bit about solving or discussing some of the problems that we and the countries around us have. So this is basically why we have decided to do a discussion about the problems of formal education when it comes to games and game development, and why we don't have any educational programs at universities or other types of schools, or maybe what is maybe forming in the very near future and where it will all lead. So before we begin, I would like to introduce our guests. So starting with Lucia Šitková, who is one of the co-founders of Pixel Federation and also currently is leading several educational initiatives that are centered around games and game development. One of them is Skill Drill, which she presented today during the Game Days lectures. Another one of the discussers will be Tamáš Liška over here. Tamáš is one of the founders of Analog Festival, which is a really awesome animation festival situated in Budapest. But he is also a teacher, or was a teacher at Budapest Metropolitan University, where he was also the head of department of media design studies. Right? So then we have Andrej Sikora, who is over here, and he's the member of the founding team at the Department of Game Design at FAMU, which is a Czech school mainly focused on visual arts and filmmaking, but they are working on creating a department that will be focusing mostly on storytelling and scriptwriting for video games. Then we have Jan Šicko over here, also from Slovakia, who is leading the media atelier at the Academy of Fine Arts and Design, and is also a multimedia and game developer. And last but not least, we have Michal Terko, who is a PhD student at the Mathematics, Physics and Informatics.
Not a student anymore.
Not a student anymore.
Yeah,
oh,
I
sorry.
finished my PhD.
Okay, congratulations. At the Comenius University, where he's teaching basically game design and game development. Okay. And then, of course, I'm very sorry. Then we have it's like 4 days of the festival already behind us, so I'm very sorry. Then we have Adam Wojciechowski, who is an academician and a research fellow at the Technical University of Łódź. So basically we have we have the full P4 countries over here, except you're from Slovakia, but working on Czech University. Okay, so let's get right into it. Alright, so at least from my point of view, one of the biggest problems when it comes to education and game design in former socialist countries and Eastern European bloc is that we are sort of staying behind when it comes to following trends or trying to be flexible enough when it comes to creating new departments for jobs that are basically still very young, let's say 5, 10, 15 years old, stuff that hasn't existed before. And maybe this is, at least from my point of view, one of the problems why we still don't have departments that are focusing on game design. So I would maybe start with a question whether you agree or not with this, and what from your point of view is the problem, if you don't agree or if you agree. So maybe let's start with Lucia.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer this question because I'm from the business side. So yes, I fully agree. I only can see that the universities are way too slow to adjust to our needs. Maybe that's why we started some of the educational initiatives that we have, because we see that people who come from universities don't have the necessary skills, and don't have the understanding of the overall process and all the nuances of the game design. So there are a few universities that have a subject or a program, but there's no bigger picture, and that's, I think, from the point of view of the business owner, we need people who understand one craft but have the understanding of the whole process.
Yeah, so just one note, maybe let's not do the discussion in a circling type of way, but every time someone wants to say something, maybe just raise your hand or give us a signal, and maybe it will be more productive this way.
So from my point of view, the main problem is like the background of the academies are not so interdisciplinary as game development or game design is. So this is the main issue, and I think it needs some time to be like like put it to the program, the process of maybe cooperation between academies and connecting maybe ateliers or studios together and develop something over the academies itself. So maybe this is the main thing. It has to be done first and maybe quite quickly, because the academies and the process of making something like this real, it's really very slow. So it depends on the structures, and it's really hard to really react on the market. So this is the main problem for me.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, I'm teaching at the Faculty of Mathematics, Physics and Informatics. We also see a very declining numbers of students. So there's like a 60% drop of incoming students to our faculty, and it's been stable, and it's dropping every year. And yeah, which means there's not enough even PhD students who could maybe start helping with these like new study courses and so on that could eventually evolve over the few years or several years that it would take to evolve into full-fledged study programs on universities.
Be the devil's advocate. I'm coming from a privately owned university, Budapest Metropolitan University, and we have growing numbers of students, and we would tend to have even more, and we are very willing to open the subject like or even faculties for game design. The problem is that we're, by being privately owned university, we're technically the competition of government-owned universities, and government actually makes the rules, and it's awfully hard to get through registration for a new kind of education. I'm running the media design department, which is media arts, and we try to open it more and more like to game design. But to establish a department for game design, you would need to handle tons of papers, and the part that's really missing is teachers, like well-qualified teachers coming from the industry with all qualifications, holding PhD, having academic skills, and having a reference and citation index and so on. So to be part of the scientific academic life and be very good at game design, those sort of person does not really exist, or like was into game design today and also would be able to teach, is not willing to teach really a full-time employee in the university because he's enjoying his job anyway, like creating games. Why would he spend his working days with teaching students full-time? So it's very hard to get those papers to establish a department for game design with all the people with the required qualifications. So it's if you're coming from the industry and you're missing, I don't know, formal university level education in game design, please take the job and come to the universities to work for us.
We were addressed with this question a number of times, but the thing is that in order to teach, you need to have the PhD, and most of our employees don't have that, so it's a chicken and egg kind of a problem. So that's why, and quite frankly, in the recruitment process, we are not looking at the degree at all. That's not what matters. We look at the skills, and they don't have the skills, and because they don't teach them at universities, we don't care. What we want to see is the portfolio. So that's why I'm kind of thinking, is it necessary to create like university degree type of program? Wouldn't it be enough to create a full-fledged 2-year course that would crash course, like crash teach every skill that is necessary so they can start earlier making money and also do what they like to do? What's the question? I don't know the answer to that. But and that's saying that I don't think that academic way is the wrong way. Like it's one of the ways, but for the business, it is not really necessary.
Okay, I will just start by saying that I'm probably the only one here who is from a department that doesn't exist yet, so everything I'm saying is kind of hypothetical. But first thing first, I think that at least in Czech Republic, you don't need a PhD to teach, and most of our recruits, mostly from the game design area, don't really even have BAs because many game designers don't have a formal education. But the thing that we are kind of in conflict with, and we are coming, we have to come to terms with the fact that many people from this industry and this area are young and they want to have fun, they want to work on different projects and so on. And our program, the formal part, it takes 3 years. And when you ask a game designer, would you like to commit half of your working time for 3 years to this project? They will say, I have no idea where I'm going to be in 1 year. And that's one of the problems that we're kind of finding with when it comes to finding a course or teachers who are in the industry. It's not such a problem with game studies, with theoretical part of the thing, but practical, it's other issues.
My expression from, let's say, my short experience of just making some, let's say, developing game design courses is this, in fact, the universities especially try to specialize in the research field. And the more research you are, you just a bit neglect some aspect of cooperations, and skills are very specialized. And in fact, the better university you would like to be, the more specialized you have to be. It just defeat the problem of multidisciplinary courses. And maybe some suggestions, maybe expressions concerning how we can try to solve it. So we just try to make it bottom up. So we just skip the formalities, because formally just launching new faculty with a new, let's say program may last ages, especially if you have to find plenty of, let's say, confirmation stamps until you just launch the first students. So the game development and the companies, the industry needs it now. So we try at least to make some, let's say, interdisciplinary courses which are incorporated in the currently existing courses. So we have some flexible requirements of the course, and we somehow maybe not push, but convince the students to cooperate with some among different universities, the Fine School of Art, with the musicians, with the technicals, with the artists. But in this point, we have the problem with the system of work, because every discipline has different methods of thinking, and it's of course probably possible to make some productive results. However, we have to adjust somehow to each other, because we have a different pace of completion of tasks.
Okay, thanks. Also, maybe if you would like to join the discussion or have a question that we would like to ask during our talk, just raise your hand and let us know. Okay, so moving on. Then there's another very interesting thing, at least for me, is maybe the division between technical universities and arts-oriented universities. That some of you actually are from arts-oriented universities, some of you are from tech-oriented universities. And basically the strange thing is that there are several game development jobs that are basically taught on university, but probably wouldn't be preferred or wouldn't be taught on the second type of the university. So if you, for example, want to have a full faculty that would be centered around several or various jobs, like let's say screenwriting, programming, art design, level design and stuff like that, basically the character of the university and the division between tech and arts is sort of breaking the possibility of having a very huge unified faculty where you would be able to teach like everything. So people coming out of these types of universities know one thing, but they don't have any experience with working with basically their colleagues that they will have to have when they will be making games that are oriented on the second type. So is there maybe a solution for this, or how would you solve this, or how do you think this should be working?
Okay, well, I can start. Again, a hypothetical scenario. But basically, the environment we are coming in is strictly artistical. PAMO is a very arts-oriented school. When we were talking before the panel, Roman was surprised that we've got like 5 students in 1 year. We're going to accept more. It's something that basically happened in PAMO. But I would like to say that even like in a game design team or in a game development team, in the companies you don't have like unified people. Everyone can be specialized at something. And I think the idea of a unified faculty or a unified teaching program can be great. On the other hand, you can actually kind of the existing structures into your program. There's a great department of graphic engine programming at Charles University at the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics, which we are cooperating with. There's a great tradition of doing kind of animation work in game design. I think everyone knows Amanita Design, who are basically the guys from Chrome. And there's a kind of tradition that's been created at the philosophy Faculty of Arts at the Charles University, which started with the game studies program. I think it starts in 1 and 2 years. So the idea here is to kind of connect all these points that exist in Prague and have them benefit the program. At least it's our current approach.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things, as I said, in Slovakia that also exist, but they are not yet connected. But I think that it's just a question of time. There's also our part-time school kind of brought together the faculties. Also now we are talking about full-time program where the multidisciplinary is obligatory. The teams need to be made of different crafts that need to work together. And we also want to have universities as part of this program, just because we understand because we work with it every day. We see that most of our problems come from not game designers not understanding artists not understanding programmers. Like the differences between the languages are there, and they need translators. They need to understand the process, and you can only learn that by communicating with each other. So yeah, I think that's the only way, and we need to make the universities cooperate better.
I totally agree, but I agree less and less as I'm becoming a more and more experienced teacher. As a responsible teacher, I'm very much focused on the 3, 5, 4, 5 years of the students. Give the best for them personally to achieve the best, like to get out the best of themselves. And the idea sounds really good to work together with like animation people do the animation and graphic designers do the graphic design backgrounds. We get some people from technological university to do the programming. It sounds all good until you start to do it actually, and it comes with lots of frustration when they have but I have an exam from mathematics, I have an exam from art history, and everybody has their excuses in the shadows of the rest of their studies. So originally we tried it time and time. It sounds very good, they enjoy it very much, but when it comes to practical work, when they are not in an actual job, they're just still studying. This sort of pressure that we talk about, like the different language skills, the different disciplines, it becomes a frustration, and that's not good. I think that's the worst thing you can do to stop them from going to game industry. So it's a little bit more complex. You have to give them good experience of teamwork. It would be ideal to have this integrated classes, but in practice it's quite shaky.
Yeah, just absolutely agree. You need to make the conditions right for them to do that.
For instance, I started the summer school of game development last year, which is going to start this Monday, the second year, and we realized that we need to connect these students from like programming and art and so on. So we tried it last year, but it was only a 4 weeks course, and we realized that it's terribly short. That in 4 weeks you can teach them the absolute basics, really, and you need something much longer, and they need to stay a team much longer. For instance, the skill drill that Lucia introduced this year, it might work out much better because these are 3 teams that know each other since November or October, and now they're all continuing into the summer school of GameDev, which was extended to 5 weeks, and we hope that gradually we could improve upon this and give them something that is not just absolute basics. Get them to give them some real experience. That I'm not saying that the last year the 4 weeks were not useful, but it could be so much more useful if we do it better and improve it every single year.
So just maybe to add to your expressions, we practice for 3 years, and we usually dedicate 3 months for such an experience. And 2 things, in my opinion, are important. One thing is something more than just acceptance among the teachers. It should be full engagement, because different universities is much more effort to combine all the groups. So acceptance is not enough. It should be full, let's say, engaged teachers who control the schedule, the time, the deadlines. And the second thing, which is very crucial in my opinion, is some kind of the authorities who help to solve the critical problems when very heterogeneous group has some conflict during the process. Because when we are isolated somehow, we are from different universities, we in a conflict situation, we just behave just to keep the safe position. And then the authority, the industry representative should, let's say, put some conclusions and may help the group to find the best way how to proceed with the project. Otherwise, without industrial input to this process, it usually is not very constructive.
Yeah, that's why we have a lot of industry mentors in the summer school, and also it's happening during the summer exactly because of what you mentioned, that students during the year, I saw it in my course like lots of times. That's really skilled students were not working on their projects because they had more important and let's say obligatory courses that they had to finish, and they just didn't have the time.
So what you're doing basically sounds like you're almost doing, let's say, a middle school? Maybe something like that.
Yeah,
So
you could say that.
So has any one of you considered an idea that maybe the way of starting the formal education in game design, maybe there would be a easier way trying to create a middle school where basically the academic rules aren't that extremely strict as when it comes to universities?
I'm not sure how strict the rules are. I'm sure there are. I haven't explored it yet, but there is a few schools that we've tried to work with. I know we work with an animation school. We work with electronics. They learn basic coding, and we had a number of lectures. But we haven't created just yet like a course that would teach gaming, but we are strongly considering it.
Maybe it's also about the position of the absolvent. What he should be like, if he will be like art director or just normal like designer or junior or something. I think the main thing is like you have to really learn some skills and cooperate. But there are also on academies this broader point of view of the picture of the absolvent. He should be really like something more than just a worker, and he should be aware of creative process and all the things. They are really more abstract than just the skills, and they are changing with the tools and the game design, and all this environment is changing so quickly that it's really needed to teach those people more, think more abstract about the creative processes and all the cooperation. So from my point of view, this is the main issue. It has to be done on the field of academy, because you don't have to be just focused on your profession, because this is somehow as well very dangerous. You don't have this kind of, let's say, parallel view, or you cannot see all those other processes that are involved in. So that's the thing.
I fully agree. I think it needs to be in cooperation. Like universities need to cooperate and create something more practical, because we cannot know, we cannot teach the theory, we cannot teach the abstract concepts. We know how to teach the craft. And one thing that I wanted to add, like to take it one step further, and I'll give you the word, is that game industry is not recognized as serious business enough. I think there needs to be more pressure on that too. Film industry has a school, it has people perceive it very differently, not just people in general, but people who make decisions. We are still more gambling than gaming.
Okay, just short add-on, because I'm from Petromat, I'm from Games from Košice, game development studio, and we are actually a little bit more far ahead in terms of implementation of education for the secondary school. So I just wanted to, because we are doing a contest in game development every year. It's called IHA, and it's being organized by UP, University of Palau Shepherd. And we noticed actually that there is a lot more contestants coming from secondary grammar schools than it's coming from university, actually, which is a bit shame, but it's like that. And the difference is really huge. Like, we are talking maybe 3-4 teams from universities and like 15 teams coming from secondary schools. And luckily, we have a school in Košice. It's a secondary school. It's focused on art and technical stuff, and they were actually very open to start cooperation with us, and they are very much into the cross-business education, so they are involving people from the industry. So we are starting basically the next year the course in game development. They have made the entire lab for us for the game development, and we should start in September. So I don't know how it will go, but we hope for the best. We have had an introduction presentation I think a few weeks ago, and people, there was a lot of students, maybe 50, maybe 100, and they liked the presentation and the opportunity, and so hopefully this will go well. Thank you.
follow up on that? Just before Adam or after Adam?
Before.
So, okay, we've just been through the entrance exams to the university just 2 weeks ago, and from year to year I see this change of like newer generations coming in who take game design as their aim for life. Like that's just their life's goal, and this hasn't been like this 3 years ago so much as it is today. And I'm also doing a lot of contests, like a jury on different talent competitions, and there are 7, 8-year-old kids who do much better games than I can ever achieve on bachelor levels on a compulsory course. So I think the key is motivation, and we reached the critical level of students coming into universities who really want to do game design, and they think, okay, yeah, I'm called graphic designer, I'm called, I don't know, filmmaker, but what I really want to do is game design. If they're in majority in any faculty, whatever you call it, they would shape it. But it's like, we don't have to rely on ministries or, I don't know, authorities. They would find their way out, because I see this trend coming very, very massively up.
Okay, so my expression to your, let's say, conclusions concerning, according to the knowledge I just get from some interesting representatives, that of course we can find plenty of skilled people who get the knowledge descent for just completion very ambitious, attractive tasks. However, what kind of problems they face? They face the problem in communication, because if you're skilled, you can make something individual. So you can have your idea, you can complete it. However, very frequently the game creation process is a group process, and you don't having not descend, let's say, the names and the theory backgrounds. You may face the problem with the communication, with exchanging the method of work, the expressions, the solving the problems in the meantime. So they face it. So there are skilled people, but there's a problem of their cooperation with more advanced aspects, especially with the games for AAA, something like that. So for the engine games, it might be really helpful. But when you make the technology, the skills are not enough. You need something more.
Communication is the key. We are almost 200 people company, and I run the internal education system, and it's purely based on knowledge sharing and communication. We have as one of the key skills that we try to develop, because we find that we fall on that. No matter how flat you make the structure, no matter how much you encourage that people cooperate, you still find that a lot of the problems that happen and the time lapses are based on someone not saying something to someone else, and how they say it.
I would just like to continue with the point about communication, and one of the things that has been said here before was that basically it's hard to enforce the inter-university or inter-faculty cooperation. But one of the things basically FAMU, I think, does well is the fact that a film, it takes a lot of people to make. It's also a teamwork. Even though you have some kind of creative mind, like the director, if the sound designer doesn't finish the sound, or if the editor doesn't finish the editing, then all of the people from the film will fail. And it may sound a bit stupid, but I think that it's one of the keys to good cooperation is that if you want to have a subject that includes cooperation, then if someone doesn't make his work or doesn't finish his work, he needs to fail. And that's, I think that's the motivation that can drive people forward.
Okay, so let's just say that we already have a university where there's a very well established game design program already being taught, and I'm quite interested on your thoughts about how important is teaching about theory and history of video games versus teaching about practical skills. Because when we come back to that I mentioned the complexity of having like a full-fledged faculty teaching basically quite a lot of things. then is there an added value in not teaching only technical skills but also history and theory and stuff like that? Or should it be added value, or should it be like from the beginning and equally important as teaching people practical skills? So let's say we would be having a class that would be teaching about contemporary Serbian games.
I'll start with a very strong opinion. I come from a department that basically produces audiovisual art, mostly aimed at galleries or at festivals. And I think the theoretical background, the theoretical frameworks that are being taught in our department are like the core of the work, and I think it's very important. It's not important for people who want to work in the industry as workers, but I think it's important for people who want to innovate the industry or who want to actually create something new and want to bring, let's say, game design to the next level, or to create something that's going to be on the same level as art and film or music or whatever.
Pass it on, but it's for the advocacy of the gaming as well.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And again, it's something like if we want to create something new, we always are based on programs, and you always try to put things that are already done and try to put in a new context and try something new. So it's really very important from my point of view.
Well, I include the first lecture of my course is always about games history, because I use examples throughout the course regarding some key games that I consider that everyone should know very well, and it really helps with the communication. You can say yeah, it's like Counter-Strike but zero gravity, then suddenly you communicated so much information in only 4 or maybe 5 words that it really helps. And as all of you previously mentioned, that the communication is key, and also it's kind of, you could call it games literacy. There's this extra credits channel on YouTube that tackled this literacy, that they think that all the kids should be taught some basics about games, that it will help them also play games and kind of browse the deadly waters of gaming, so to say. But for game devs, it will definitely help, and I think it should be mandatory. How much or how many hours a week for history should be dedicated to these lectures? That's open to discussion, but I think it should be mandatory to help them learn to communicate about games.
Just to extend it even further, I think the real breakthrough will be when game design and game history wouldn't be locked up into term games. If we're talking about universities, university level education, we are trying to establish something that's part of general culture. So if you can connect as a teacher and as a student, you are able to understand that your work is part of a major underlying current in art history, that game design is a form of art, and it's a audiovisual language added with interaction added. So if you understand that, if there was, I don't know, Unity and 3D in the Renaissance times, well, we would probably have some games from Leonardo. So it's the attitude that you're trying to communicate something to the world, like your experiences, you want to communicate your stories in the form of games. And as soon as you understand this and you make yourself understood in that way, then game design will be worth of a master's degree, and not even the ministries would refuse that, in my theory, in my hopes.
My last expression. I think that as a technical faculty, we of course put much more emphasis to the technical aspect of mathematics, physics as a background of the tech. However, we of course teach the history, and of course we empower students for the two things. So teaching the history and playing the games as well to increase the creativity, because technical students become usually less creative than the artists, and just giving them examples and analyzing the examples, we can find some maybe new smart combinations that may evoke some new proposals in gameplays or game design and so on.
I just always feel a bit surprised when everyone talks about like the context and the theory, mostly in terms of history. But I think that also the kind of critical thinking part of the subject is very important. Like, you shouldn't only ask the question like how did this game influence that game and what this mechanic did, but you should also be able to answer the question like what is the difference with time manipulation in Braid and time manipulation that Alan Ernest does in Last Career in Marionette. I think it's important this kind of intermediate kind of point of view on the theory of games and on the practice of playing games and actually having some feeling or having some kind of artistic eureka moment or whatever.
Maybe there is as well important aspect of the context. I mean, like the user interaction, how those computers were played in the past. So this is another thing. Like you have a lot of another subjects that are important in the view of history. So as well, those hardware were developing, and as well the way how we use them as a keyboard or as a joystick or gamepad. And as well, it's really important to build a vocabulary. So, I mean, the terms of how those mechanics are implemented in games and in game design in general. So, maybe this is another aspect of game developing, and this kind of what is funny, what is like playing the game, and how we can use it in another aspects of, let's say, education. So there is another thing we can subtract all these ideas to something what is called gamification. So this is another huge topic, and it's really important to just maybe analyze and think how we can use those aspects of playing games into the real world and another aspect of life.
Every university or every department needs their, I'm not sure if it's the right expression in English, but in Slovak it's garant. So basically the head of the department that has the biggest skill is the professor, or has to be the professor, to be able to hold the department together. So in your opinion, in our countries, is it possible to become a professor that has a focus on game design? Or will we have to be using, at least for several next years, or at least for a decade, someone who actually comes from a different field, or is a little bit differently oriented? Or will we have professors with this kind of focus that would be heads of these kinds of departments?
Well, I see it from the technical university side, and to be a professor means, for instance, I now have a PhD. If I were to go to the professor route, that would mean teaching at least, I think it's 10 or 15 years, continue teaching, then publish papers that are internationally accepted, that have some impact factor and so on, then write a few books, and then get to the level of I think it's docent or associate professor. Then have a few PhD students; those have to finish their PhDs. Then you have to be a professor. And from these publications, I don't think that the scientific community in technical background would accept like game design papers or books as papers that have actually an impact factor, because these journals are usually publishing hard computer science, and it would just not get accepted. These papers would just not get accepted. They would have to go to some other field. Maybe in art it's different, but from the technical point of view, it's pretty hard. The ideal way would be, for instance, I studied computer graphics, and it's a pretty close field, but it's still pretty far from game design. But that maybe convince someone to actually switch careers. For instance, an associate professor, like, hey, you're gonna teach games. But the problem is that these associate professors have no experience in teaching games or game design and so on. And then they would have to be these guys who guarantee the quality of the study program. So it's gonna be a hard and long process, and the technical side, I think it's gonna be near impossible. I know it sounds a little pessimistic, but that's how it is.
Just to give a little bit more optimistic note, very same thing has happened with film industry, for example. Like we're at the stage with game design where the film industry was 100 years before, and of course Lumiere didn't have published again, and there were no film schools in the 1910s, but now they are. So just wait just a few decades, and then we will have that. The question, I think, is whether we really need to push so much forward, because sooner or later it would happen. And in art universities, we're in the lucky position not to replace publishing. Like if you don't publish articles, but you direct films that get, I don't know, Oscar nominations, then it's accepted as publication. So it's all okay. We just need more time. Why is the industry pushing so hard to get to the formal degrees? Is that really so important to hold a master's degree in game design, or you need the knowledge, or you need the papers? Is my provocative question.
That's a very good question. For the employers, they don't need the paper, I need the knowledge, the experience. But to your analogy, 100 years ago the situation was a little different. The world is a very different place now. It changes a lot faster. So I think the universities are getting very far out of line in the flexibility matter. If we want to create something, I don't think we should wait decades. I think we should be a faster process if we need it. To your question, to your provocative question.
So maybe from our university, so in fact it's very difficult to name that somebody is a professor of the computer games. Usually you have to specialize in a bit different field. However, there is a chance for solving this problem, because when you become a professor, you may declare what's your specialization. So you have to become the professor in a bit different field, maybe related like computer graphics and some aspect of programming. Later on you declare yourself, become an authority that you, for example, can teach and specialize in computer games. And when we find at least, let's say, one professor who can launch the PhD students and 2 reviewers, we create some kind of the origin of computer games field. And of course, it will last until we finally name the computer out as a game design, school game design research field. But it's like with any other, let's say, research field, besides maybe mathematics and physics, which was for ages. We have plenty of, let's say, fields that have the same problems, like logistics, for example, and some others, which don't have professors specializing in this field, but it's a process. So if we finish someday.
I've got just 2 cynical notes to make. The first one is that in the art world, or at least in the BFA/MFA world, MGA, that's You don't really need to publish papers to become a professor, as Jura Jakubisko was just named a professor by FAMU. And his presentation was about fairy tale tropes in Harry Baba. So that's the first simple note. And the second would be that I think that you can pose the question as whether you need the knowledge or the formal proof of I'm a game designer, but all the time, at least in art schools, the art schools are places that confront your views and make you do something better. And all the films that got into Cannes in the last 20 years came from an art school and not from someone who didn't have a formal education. So it's just a note. I'm not saying that someone without a formal education can't get into Cannes, but I think there's some kind of credibility in doing a formal education.
So, you imagine maybe working together, like over here. What for example, the technical parts of researching for from the artistic parts or artistic schools and vice versa? So, what do you feel is missing in your university or school, and what do you think you can offer?
I think that one aspect in the interdisciplinary cooperation is some kind of synchronization, communication mentioned before, and I think that we should elaborate some system of common system of cooperation. This is one thing, and maybe the next tricky thing is the nomenclature, which is different disciplines with the same names for different things, and we should also elaborate some common language. But it happens now, so I think that we will complete soon. And besides, maybe some, no, that's all. I think that communication and the common context of cooperation. This is.
Our department doesn't exist yet, so I don't know.
Maybe just tell us what you are going to do
Of the department? Well, the idea is that FAMU has got some kind of base or some kind of structure in, for example, sound design. It's got some structure in animation because we have a department for animation. And there is also a course taught on the production of interactive media at the production studies department. So I think there are a lot of people at FAMU who can't make games, but they can make games happen. What we don't have is, of course, programmers, which is why we are trying to connect with other schools. But it is something that we would like to teach our students, at least the very basics of, how to click your game in Unity instead of programming C# or whatever.
So, of course, it's on establishing the communication or the connection with academies. And until then, I'm trying to teach my students from artistic background to code. So it's more like Renaissance attitude. And I think it's really important to merge all these two different worlds together in one person. So it's more like creative coding, and this term is quite used in the world. And it's really important because as an artist you know how to code, and maybe you can think how the programmer may be working with you. So this is important maybe to communicate, or you have the framework how you should communicate, articulate something to the programmer. And if one person merges this artistic thinking and as well maybe this abstract way of thinking of programmers, it's really great combination. And of course it's unique, it's not so common, but it's hard maybe, but this is the Leonardo, that's what it is. He's the genius. So I think it's really important to try at least people from this artistic background try to learn to code. So
I'm sorry, I just saw that this is being recorded, and I forgot to say that we also got screenwriting people who like games. So sorry, Andre, I forgot that.
Well, for instance, from my background of computer graphics, I think that studying computer graphics helps students to see the art side of the game dev equation, because they have to work with these models, textures, sprites, and so on. They know all the technical stuff behind it. They don't know the art stuff like composition and so on, but at least they have something in common with the artists, and I think it's a great way to open this common communication channel with the art side of games. So yeah, I think computer graphics is really good for this as a study program.
So, since we're running out of time, maybe I would just ask if you have a single last question. If there is anyone with a question, just raise your hand, and if not, I'm afraid that we will have to finish with the discussion because we have another part of the program coming. So, is there a question?
I'll just have one quick note. Maybe you are trying to solve the problem which already is solved somewhere outside, because there is, for example, Zurich University of Arts, and they have actually a game design professors, and they have a separate course for education, which perhaps can be maybe looked into, and perhaps find somehow cooperation with them. There's the professors, which are there, like Professor Yama, and others, and try to bring this kind of formal education into our region. I don't know. Thank you.
Do you know the game development department in Zurich?
I don't know that one.
Sorry.
I don't know that one, but what we are trying to do with our program is cooperate with FEMS, because they already have what we are trying to make running for 5 years. They cooperate with universities and they have a very practical course. So when I'm talking about the more low-level practical stuff, we are pretty much copying their structure and experience, and we are cooperating with them on that.
Thank you for saying that, because that's indeed the fact that in Western Europe there are more universities like this. We are in the Erasmus partnership with Cologne Gela, for example, who can give a bachelor's and a master's degree on game. So if I see motivation, one of my students really want to learn more about game design, I just send them out to Cologne for half a year to learn more about it there and bring home the experiences, and yeah, so later that would find its way in our countries too, I'm sure.
But maybe the professor from there can be a parent here for the course of student, so that may be an option.
Yeah, as soon as we can pay those salaries,
Especially from Switzerland.
And Finland too.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be studying games and game design very soon. And thank you everyone for participating, and let's continue the talks. Well, we'll get some beer and watch some amazing game presentations that are going on right now. Thank you very much.